Okay, welcome again to our Faith in Engineering lecture series. We're really pleased to have you. This is our third iteration of this series. How many of you have come to a previous evening lecture with us before? Okay, fantastic. So we have some returners. Tonight we have the great privilege of hearing from Professor Michael Rice. I'm going to give a very brief bio. He graduated from Georgia Tech with a PhD in 1991, came to BYU and has been here 35 years. This is his last semester at BYU, and so he's teaching the last class he will ever teach in his career. What a moment to have him here talking to us about his journey. You may be interested to know that he believes he's the only professor in our department to have driven an army tank, which I find kind of interesting. And he is one of the greatest lunch companions I think I've ever had in my life. He knows a surprising amount of Greek and New Testament scholarship. He's taught me a little bit about Paul's street Greek and what that might mean in the New Testament. So that's interesting to me. But he is someone almost universally admired in the department for his scholarship, the way he conducts his life, the contributions he makes here. And I think it's a great, like I said, privilege to have Dr. Rice give this lecture for us today. So let's welcome him. Yeah.
That doesn't work?
This one does.
All right, thank you, Ryan. I only agreed to give this talk if we did not have pizza. And then Carrie says, well, what do you want? What do you think we ought to eat? I said, how about Panda Express? She said, as long as there's rice. Where is Carrie? Carrie, stand. Carrie did a fantastic job, a last minute scramble. Stand, applause. There were some hiccups at the last minute. Carrie was running around, pulse rate was up. It's probably good for cardio. And all this was because of me, and I felt bad. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you for this. So the title of my talk has a subtitle, How Did I Get Here? And I take this from a song by one of my favorite groups called the Talking Heads. You guys are too young to know who this was. But for people my age, they were cool. And their song, Once in a Lifetime, begins as follows. This kind of got a religious thing going with it too, if you know the song. And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. And you may find, I can hear the music. I might start dancing. Then you'll leave. And then you may find yourself in another part of the world. And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a huge automobile. And you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? How did I get here? My presence here, giving a talk like this, at a place like this, and me being a professor giving a talk is one of the most improbable things you will witness in your life. 50 years ago, nobody would have predicted a dude like me would be here tonight doing this. So let me tell you about this journey. So it starts where I grew up in Ohio. It's where my ancestors are from. And I grew up in southern Ohio along the Ohio River. And in Ohio, in the day that I grew up there, is very different than here. So every town along the river has a mill. Here's some pictures of some towns near where I grew up along the Ohio River. And there were barges on the Ohio River carrying the steel that the mills produced or carrying coal to melt the steel that the mills produced and maybe carrying some other stuff they didn't want us to know about. I'd like to tell you that my home life had a happy childhood. This was not true. My mother and her mother were kind of like matter and antimatter. So, how many of you have seen that show on Disney called Andor? Do you guys remember the character who's got that mother who won't leave him alone? Nod if you know who I'm talking about. This was my grandmother. That, and women like that tend to produce silent, mousy, passive children. And that was my mother. She only ever succeeded in doing one thing well, and that was finding the most unpleasant man she could and marrying him to make her mother angry. She succeeded fantastically. That was my home. My father was a very unpleasant person. He was an abusive alcoholic, mostly not sober, up until my 17th year when he drank himself to death. We were poor because he was often unemployed. We had one old rusty car, and the neighbors always knew when my parents were fighting. I was deeply embarrassed by all of this as a child, as a kid in school. And you spend the odd few days from time to time in a battered women's shelter, and the van drives us to school. And my friends say, "Why are you coming to school? Who are those people? What's that van? Why are you here?" Don't want to talk about it. So I was embarrassed by this. And I remember hitting, I don't know, junior high and thinking, I don't think it's supposed to be like this. I think there's a better way, but I didn't know what that was. Now, I don't tell you this story to say, oh, look at me. My colleagues who are here have never heard me share that bit of my early time on earth. But I tell you that because I want you to appreciate how different being a member of the church is or can be. So I remember when the missionaries came to our home and taught us. And the feeling I had when they were there, I now know what that is, but at the time, like, I feel good when these guys are around. Oh, my dad, he hated these guys. Perhaps that was part of the appeal, right? So didn't like them. We went to church a few times. I wasn't old enough. I was a teenager, but not old enough to drive. And my big act of rebellion as a teenager was confronting my father and wanting to be baptized. And he said no. So I asked my young men's leader, what do I do? He says, you're going to have to wait till you're 18 because you need your father's permission. So I wasn't a regular attender because I couldn't always get a ride to church, and went when I could. And I was just set to wait till I was 18 to join the church. And my dad had a rare bout of soberness, and during that time, he agreed to let me be baptized. So I was baptized at age 14. Still wasn't a regular attender. Didn't really attend church regularly until I was 16 and had a driver's license. And yeah, I felt good when I was there because it was different from home. It was different from this life, this chaotic life that I had been living. Um, Often things would fall apart, and my mother would ship us to her mother, my grandmother. And I always had the sense she really didn't like us very much. And I don't think she did. Um, so church was a refuge. The young men's program was a refuge. Back in this day, sacrament meeting was the second meeting after a, how is it? He had Sunday school and priesthood in the morning. He went home, and then sacrament meeting was in the evening. I rarely attended sacrament meeting because my father would bellow, "You've wasted enough gas going to church once on Sunday. You're not going to do it twice." So um, when the consolidated schedule came out, I think I was a senior in high school. I was able to attend sacrament meetings and kind of learned what that was. Now, while I was in high school, the economy collapsed in the Midwest and all those mills closed. Everybody I knew was whose their parents were thrown out of work. And when you work in a mill your whole life and then the mill closes, it's not like you can go get a job at another mill because they're closed too. So here's pictures of some of the mills that were closing. The economy was awful. Nobody had work. All of us were poor. And our high school got a second guidance counselor whose sole purpose was to try and talk us into attending university. That's not something my peer group did when and where I grew up. 2 hours up the road in Columbus, where Mangelson's from, everything was different. But where I grew up, nobody went to. I can name. There were 5 guys in my graduating high school class that went to university. 5. There were about a dozen girls that went to university, and they became teachers and nurses. So the guidance counselor calls me in. I had pretty good grades. Calls me in my junior year. He says, "Y'all think about going to college?" I said, "Yeah, my dad did that. My mom did that." That's where they met, by the way, where the disaster started. Said, "Yeah, I've heard of that. I'm not quite sure what it is. Tell me about it." So he told me about it. And he says, "You're going to need to pick a major." My dad had a major. Don't think I want to do that. My mom had a major. She was always unemployed as well. So what you got for me, Mr. Durson? He says, "Well, what are you interested in?" I don't know. "Are you curious about anything?" "Well, now that you ask, yeah. But before I tell you what that was, I have to explain something to you people. Back in the olden days, every living room had a piece of furniture called a television set. On this television set, my parents would watch shows with people like this in it. See, the old people are laughing. You guys are, I don't know who that is. We wanted to watch shows like this. Now, I want you to look at some of the advertisements from the time. This was a piece of furniture. You see this ad? There's other stuff on top of it. And here's one. You can decorate your house with guitars and things, or put flowers on it. These things were big and they were heavy. We didn't have cable. Or streaming internet. There was no internet in these days. So you had an antenna on the top of your house. That's how you got to. I liked antennas. It gave us a legal excuse to climb up on the roof of the house. Because you'd have to adjust this thing to point to the TV transmitter. And here's a fella doing just that. Here in Utah, they still do you might not know it, but they still broadcast television, and it's over the Ochre Mountains. It's called Mount Vision. Here is a picture of the television transmitters. They chose that place west side of the south end of Salt Lake Valley so they can illuminate Utah County, Salt Lake County, and Davis County. This is my favorite picture. Here it is in the winter. So if any of you have ideas like, I think I want to be a TV serviceman, work for the broadcasters, this is where you'll have to go. So don't. In Ohio, it was often snowy and cold, so we would put our antennas in the attic. And that gave us a legal reason to climb up through the little hole in the ceiling into the attic. Now, if you lived in an apartment, which I did when I was at university, you had a little antenna, and these were called rabbit ears. They frequently didn't work, so we would do things like this to try and make them work. It didn't work. Now, there were no remote controls in those days. So I wasn't the only one, but parents would be watching my father be sitting in his chair, his lazy boy, with his feet up, watching the show. When the show was over, he'd call us in to change the channel for him. So you turned a knob up there on the right-hand side. And if you didn't like what it was, he'd bellow and you'd come running back in and you'd have to change the channel for him. So that part of my existence was not unique. So you might be interested, since you guys are electrical engineering major, here are the channels. The top dial is what they call the VHF channels. And you'll notice there's no channel 1. There was. And in 1948, it got reassigned to police and fireman radio. Radio technology got to the point they could put them in cars, so they needed a frequency band. So out goes channel 1. You see that spot between channels 4 and 5? That's where industrial garage door openers are. And if you do radio-controlled airplanes, 72 megahertz, that's where it is. The gap between 6 and 7, that's where FM radio is. 88 to 108 on your dial. That's how many megahertz the carrier frequency is. And then there were the creepy channels, all those ones down in the UHF band. So when I was a kid, that's where the weird PBS station was. The one that didn't show Sesame Street, the one that didn't show, yeah. And when Fox first came out, it was a UHF channel. So it was one of the weird channels. Okay. But two different bands. Now with cable TV, or streaming internet, you don't know any of this stuff. So this was our TV as I remember it. I got it off the internet, somebody named Dan C, but this is what I remember it looking like. And it broke. So my mother called the TV repairman. It happened to be David Jordan's father. I played on the football team with him. And his dad came over and he pulled the TV out from the corner, turned it around, took the back off to reveal that. And I remember looking at it and I said, how on earth does that turn into a picture with sound? How is it I can watch Ponch and John police the freeways in Southern California? How does that work? So Mr. Dursum said, do you have any questions? I said, yeah. I kind of want to know how TVs and radios work. No more thought in it than that. He says, oh, you want to be an engineer. First question was, what do dudes like that have to do with how TVs and radios work? And he goes, no, not that kind of engineer, an electrical engineer. And I said, oh, one of these guys. I still don't understand. Have any of you had the experience of explaining what an engineer is to, say, your mother-in-law? or father-in-law. And do you know that look they get? Because you're not quite sure what an engineer does. So you're trying to explain it to them and they go, yeah, I don't, okay. That was me. Like, okay, not doing that. Later, when I was married, working on my dissertation, my mother-in-law asked me what I was doing. And I had an office mate, his name was Bruce Harvey. And he said, just tell her you work with computers. I said, well, Sandy, I work with computers. She goes, oh, great. She was happy. So, all of you, if your in-laws ask you what you do, just tell them you work with computers. And that'll be enough. So, I applied. I got into university. I went to university. I stood in a long line. At the end of the line, someone said, what's your major? Electrical engineering. He reached in a drawer. He handed me a flow chart and said, here, take these classes. Okay. I started taking those classes. And then somewhere along the way, not soon after, I was attending church. We had a branch there. The branch president calls me in and says, you're approaching 19. You need to serve a mission. And I said, tell me about that. So he told me all the things you were told about serving a mission. Okay. Now, I need you to understand the only way that I was at university is I had 2 scholarships. Trust me when I tell you, there was no money at home. And there weren't student loans in those days. So you either got a scholarship or your parents paid for it, or you went to work in a mill. And if those options didn't work, you joined the Marines. So that was my future. I had a scholarship. I said, okay, well, let me call. So I called the scholarship people. They're in the county where I grew up. Here's a response. You want to do what? So, well, it's this thing called a mission. Both of them. I've never heard of such a thing. If you're not going to go attend university, tell us now and we'll cancel your scholarship and assign it to somebody who will attend university. Oh dear. So I went back to the branch president and said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. He goes, are you worried about paying for the mission? Yeah. Well, the church can help. I said, will the church fund my remaining 3.5 years of college? Well, no. I said, well, not going back to a town where all the mills are closed, so I think I'll stay. So for 3 years, I was pestered about serving a mission. And sometimes I felt like I was a little resentful because I felt like it was people who didn't know me wanting to tick boxes to make somebody above them in the food chain happy. So I was just going to be a box ticking exercise, and I didn't want to be a box ticking exercise. Well, eventually I did go. I was 3 years in and decided to go. And this is a picture of me in my third area. And I don't know, I potentially gave up everything to serve a mission. And I was around a bunch of guys who, not all of them, but a lot of them just had not put any thought into it. They just went because their brother went and their dad went. And so there they were. And I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be more. And it wasn't. But when I returned, I came to recognize that it had been much more than I thought it was in the moment when I'm slogging through the slums, knocking on doors, teaching discussions to people who really aren't interested. But we were fed and the food was great. So a year later, I finished my degree and I was able to answer how TVs and radios work. Here's the answer. I know this is an eyesore, all of you. This is your Rosetta Stone. you'll get through and you'll know how to read diagrams or parts of diagrams like that. And it'll help you decode what's going on in the world, just like the Rosetta Stone helped historians decipher ancient hieroglyphs. Let me just interject this because most of you know this guy. There was a dude who was part of Napoleon's army that went to invade and conquer Egypt. And it was during that French expedition that the Rosetta Stone was found. That dude's name was Joseph, Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier. He was there when the Rosetta Stone was found. It was also Fourier's first experience with real heat. And he became obsessed with heat and wanted to know, how did it propagate? How did things start cold and get hot? And he developed a theory of taking functions and decomposing them into harmonically related sinusoids to model heat transfer in solids. So anyway, this is connected to your major in ways you don't understand. So I finished my undergraduate degree, and a professor said, you should go to graduate school. You have pretty good grades on graduate school. What's that? And so he told me, seemed like something I could give it a try. I tried to find a picture, I couldn't. There was a magazine at the time called Graduating Engineer. And in Graduating Engineer was a special issue on graduate schools, and I read it. And the article said that if you tick the box for PhD, you qualify for more financial aid. I said, that's awesome. So I applied for PhD programs, having no idea what that even meant. I got accepted to Georgia Tech. I went. I stood in line. What do you want to do? I said, well, I want to learn how TVs and radios work. Oh, you're in communications. Go stand in another line. You'll see this other professor who will tell you what classes to take. So I started taking classes. I found an advisor. He was only 2 years older than me. And started doing research for him. And I loved it. I really didn't care for my undergraduate experience, but when I got to graduate school, I felt at home. While I was there, I got married. And this is my wife, Lisa. And we got married in the Atlanta Temple, Georgia Tech's in Atlanta, so the Atlanta Temple. I think the Atlanta Temple was the second temple east of Denver. And when I was there were only 3 temples east of Denver. When was the Denver Temple? Somebody Google it. When did the Denver Temple come online? I think when I was a missionary, the only temple east of the Rockies was the Washington, D.C. temple, which was my temple. But 1986. Yeah, I was home from a mission by then. So, yeah. So you look at this guy, looks like a kid. That's me. Guys, I grew old. This wasn't supposed to happen. Lisa, she looks the same. Well, except she doesn't have the 80s hair and outfits with shoulder pads anymore. She looks the same, but I look completely different. So I'm riding they have a subway system or light rail system in Atlanta. And so one day I'm getting near the end, I'm riding home, and I had this impression to apply to BYU. So I got home and I told Lisa, hey, I had this impression, maybe I should apply to BYU. You see her response? So, well, let me apply. We'll go check it out. If it's really as bad as you think it is, we'll move, or I won't take the job. So I started here in the fall of 1991. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I've been here longer than you've been. Yeah. Okay. Oh man. And if we had another, I don't know, 18 hours, I could tell you story after story after story. But there's one story I do want to share before I move on to the scripture part of the presentation. Do you guys remember last semester when about two-thirds of the faculty were displaced from the hall, from their offices? You guys remember this? Okay. The reason we were displaced was because of bats. Now, we make sure the dean is not out. I am not authorized to show you this video. I'm going to show it to you anyway. Okay, let's make this big. You know. So fall semester was kind of a challenge. How long were we out? Like 5, 6 weeks? Okay, so we're at about 6 weeks. And right after we moved back in, after the debatting had run its course, we were back in our offices. I attended a conference. Guys, I couldn't make this up. I'm at the conference, and the theme of the conference is AI. And one of the panelists on one of the AI panels was explaining to us that they had trouble training their radars. He was a guy at Eglin Air Force Base. You won't know where that is. It's on the Gulf of Mexico. They fly drones out over the Gulf, and then F-16, it's really cool to be there. F-16s take off, fly out over the Gulf, and shoot the thing down. It's cool stuff. So this guy said, yeah, our radars track all this stuff, and we're trying to use AI. And our biggest problem in training AI is bats. And somebody said, why? He said, because bats are flying bags of dipoles. You didn't laugh as much as I thought you would. I thought it was fun. I then said, I got to meet this guy. And so here's a picture of him. Can you see what his name is? His name's Bob Ross. Bob Ross calls flying bags of dipoles. How cool is that? Okay. So it's just improbable. Okay. So the big question for this talk is here. My discipline, our discipline, does not address any of the social or moral issues of the day, at least directly, right? We do engineering stuff. There are no scriptural passages saying that what I'm doing research in is God's will, nor does it say whatever I'm doing research in is something I shouldn't be doing research in. It just doesn't. Nowhere in the Book of Mormon does it say differential detection of CPM is something you really shouldn't be doing. You're going to burn in hell if you do that. It just doesn't. So the question that I've always struggled with on this topic is, how does being a person of faith influence my scholarship? Because I don't cite scriptures in the journal papers that I write. So what do I do? Well, I really like this quote from, who is this? You guys old enough to know who this is? Gordon Hinckley, yeah, okay. It's not enough just to live, just to survive. And I know for those of you who've just cleared junior core, this is how you lived. So he's referring to not that semester, okay? It's incumbent on each of us to equip ourselves to do something worthwhile in society, to acquire more and more light, so our personal light can help illuminate a darkened world. My presence here is that the church does offer an alternative for a lot of people in this country who don't have a very good life. We have something to offer, and I hope you can appreciate. I pray that you never have to experience what I did, but I also pray that you will appreciate what you do have. It can bring life. I'm living a life married in the temple. I was the first one and only one in my family. My wife was the second in her family. Her family joined when she was a child, and then she was a child of record when she got baptized. Um, yeah, when our kids, I think it's cool to look on my church record and see our 4 children born in the covenant. I think that's cool because that's not something that we have in our family, in my ancestry family. So this is all really new to us, the Rices. So, oh, I've got a great story to tell about him, but we're running out of time. Um, in a devotional, I've already forgotten his name. I'm nervous in front of this meeting. Tom Perry, yeah. Still a great story. We will play no part in saving our world, in preparing it for its destiny, or in making it a better place to live if we refuse to be a part of it and make our contribution to it while we live. And then David O. McKay, I got a great story about him too, but we don't have time. And he talked about right here, that is our duty to make the world better for having been in it. And that's how I think we, in a technical major, can bring the light of the gospel to our professions and to our lives and to others. We can try and do things that make the world a better place for us having been in it. Now, there's a well-known passage in 1 Nephi, Lehi's vision. Nephi then has the vision. And I want you to read the bit I have highlighted there in verse 20. I beheld a straight and narrow path. We all know it. I always pictured the building on the left, but in this picture it's on the right. Don't know why, that's just how I pictured it. Which came along by a rod of iron, even to the tree by which I stood. I think this is the picture we always think of, and this is a picture we always strive to live, that we're holding on to the iron rod and we're walking toward that magnificent tree and all the blessings that are there. And for those of you whose life is like this, I applaud you. Well done. This has not been my life. My life's more like down here in verse 24. And it came to pass. What else would the Book of Mormon say? And it came to pass that I beheld others pressing forward, and they came forth and caught hold of the end of the iron rod, and they did press forward through the midst of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron, even until they came forth. So you know, because you've read the end, that they come out the other side and they see the tree. But I want you to imagine being in the darkness, holding onto that rod, having no idea where you're going, hoping that it's just all going to work out. That is how my first 25, 20, 28, 30 years were. Just, I'm told to do this. I love the church. It saved my life. I'm holding on to that rod, but man, I'm just not seeing it. So if this is your life, you're not quite sure where you're going, you think you know what the right thing is, hold on to that rod. Keep pressing forward, just like it says here. That's what I did, and I came out the other side, and I think I'm in a pretty good place. So I'll close here with my favorite quote from President Hinckley. Each of us can do a little better than we have been doing. We can be a little more kind. We can be a little more merciful. We can be a little more forgiving. We can put behind us the weaknesses of our past and go forth with new energy, an increased resolution to improve the world around us, and our homes, and our places of employment, and our social activities. So try a little harder to be a little better. And I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay. You have time for questions?
Hey, we're gonna do an Ask Me Anything session with Dr. Rice. This is your chance, your last chance. Questions?
That's for Dr. No, go ahead.
How did you end up learning Greek?
How did I end up learning Greek? I was curious. I wanted to know what the New Testament said. So, what would it be now? 10 years ago, I looked up Greek 101 in the BYU. This is a great thing about being at BYU. Georgia Tech could have never done this. I looked up Greek as an ancient language, not Greek, the history, and saw that it was Greek 101 was being offered. And Stephen Bay was a professor. I sent him an email and said, hey, I'm a professor over in engineering. Do you mind if I come sit in on the class? He said, sure, love to have you. You know Stephen Bay. And I went. Guys, gals, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I have a PhD in electrical engineering, and ancient Greek was harder. It was hard, but it was fun. So my side hobby is getting the best version of the Greek New Testament and working through my own translation. I'm terrible at translating, but it's still a lot of fun. For example, I got to that part in John chapter 1. You guys will know this. The Pharisees, the priest, and well, at least the priest and Levites, trying to think of how it goes in English. The priests and Levites approached John the Baptist and they asked him who he is. Anybody remember how he answered? Not really, but maybe, yeah. I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. That is brilliant. Here's what the Greek says literally. I am the sound of shouting in the desert. So if I were translating the New Testament, you would have John the Baptist saying, I'm the sound of shouting in the desert. Don't you think the voice of one crying in the wilderness is so much better? Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, it was just curious. And because I'm at BYU, I can go sit in on a class like that. And it was so hard. Oh my gosh. Vocabulary kills you. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Hannah. Okay, what did I enjoy teaching? If I'm completely honest with you, I'm going to expand teaching. What I enjoyed teaching the most was the one-on-one, one-on small group mentoring opportunities. I found that deeply, deeply rewarding. And that's what I'll miss the most, I think, is that interaction. I will not miss trying to find a parking place. I will not miss the frustration of OIT, but I will miss some of you guys. Those of you who've taken a class from me know I really, really don't like big class. I am not Brad Wilcox, so I don't like big classes and the performance. I like smaller classes, so I tend to like. So anyway, but one on small group, it can be immerse, it can be graduate students, it can be a combination of them, during the school year. So yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Guys, I'm going to do whatever I want. That's what I'm going to do. The hardest question I want to answer is ESPN or ESPN2. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in the back there. Yeah. Okay, my favorite sport is football. Second favorite is soccer. This is a hard time of year for me because I don't like basketball. I know that's the sacred church activity, basketball, but I don't like it. My favorite team is whoever makes it look easy and fun. So, if you grew up where I did, your local team, Cincinnati Bengals. It's tough being an NFL fan when the Bengals. I mean, they're good right now, but when I was there, they were. To say they were dreadful was giving them too much credit. So, yeah. And, the other team in the state, who is it? Cleveland Browns, yeah. They're the only team worse than the Cincinnati Bengals, So, yeah. But no, a few years ago, I really liked watching the Chiefs, because, with Mahomes and all those guys, it looked fun. Last year wasn't so fun. Um, back in Rodgers' day, the Packers were kind of fun. I got tired of Aaron Rodgers though, because he got weird. But yeah, it just kind of depends who's playing. I just want to watch it, a good game, a well played game. So yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, okay, right here, yeah. It just stemmed from how TVs and radios worked. Really, it went from there. Yeah, I can't tell you the story, but I remember as an undergraduate, I really didn't like power. And I really didn't care for circuits. Now, if you love circuits and power, I still like you. It's just I didn't find those topics very interesting. And I remember expressing an exasperation to one of my professors that, how come there's not stuff that I like? And he goes, well, you have to like this or else you're not a real electrical engineer. I said, fine, give me another label. I want to take the classes I'm interested in. So in graduate school, I got to gravitate to that specialty. And at a certain abstract level, all of it's the same stuff. So yeah, it's why I went to college, because that's what I was interested in. So yeah, thanks. Behind you, there was a question, or yeah. Oh, I have to narrow it down to one. Oh. Um, gosh, so many things. So many things. I think early on in my career, I didn't take time to just enjoy the journey. I was so worried about keeping my job, publishing, and all the stuff that prepping for new classes. I just didn't enjoy the journey. So when you get to the later in your career, like I am, you enjoy the journey more because, the pressing needs just aren't there. And you go, wow, I could have enjoyed this for a lot longer. So yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Yeah. Guys, one more, because we've been here long enough. Yeah.
Do you have anyone follow you in the family business?
Well, I have four: boy, girl, boy, boy. The oldest is 35, finished his PhD last summer in linguistics, of all things. And guys, linguistics lives in a college of humanities. He's trying to find a faculty position, and this is a tough time if you're a humanities professor to find a faculty position. He's currently postdocing at Florida State, and he has two children, or two grandchildren. Number two is a zookeeper, also in Florida. Number three is, he got married 2 years ago now, and he and his wife are expecting our third grandchild, and they live out in Eagle Mountain. And number four graduated from aerospace engineering right here in our own ME department. He graduated in April, and Dr. Beard was stunned to see me not only at graduations, not only stunned to see me at graduation, but it wasn't even our own. It was the ME graduation. He goes, what are you doing here? My son. So anyway, I got to put the robe of the apostate priesthood on and sit on the stage. And when my son came through, I got to get up and shake his hand. So he graduated in April, got married in July. She's from Alaska. Casey's her name. She graduated from Emmy as well, and now they are both PhD students at the University of Michigan. It is our arch rival if you're from Ohio, but I can suspend that while my son is there. Michigan's a great program, so he's in aerospace there. So thank you for asking about family. Yeah, and you know what, guys? It's I wasn't even sure I wanted to have children. Sister Rice did. She knew the plan, but I was still holding on to that rod in darkness and going, kids, maybe other people do that. My family's just nothing but a dumpster fire. I'm just not sure we're kid people. But yeah, Sister Rice, she prevailed, and I'm glad we did. So yeah, we had our moments, like all of you gave your parents. So, all right, well, time is up. Thank you. Thank all of you.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. That was fantastic. And thanks for your good questions. We will have our next Faith and Engineering lecture in March, and we will see you then. So thanks for coming. I think the food's all cleaned up. I was going to see if there was any more we needed you to get, but okay.